Hey, Jennifer.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going good.
So good to be here with you.
It's so good to be here with you. So today we're going to talk about trauma and triggers.
Oh, awesome. That makes me think of someone I just talked to, actually, who was on an elevator, got trapped in an elevator. And we were talking about it, and she said, now I haven't been able to get back on an elevator. And when I hear the ding of an elevator, I notice I almost start to get a panic attack. And I said, listen, let me tell you what's going on. Had a traumatic event, got stuck in your amygdala, very important part of your brain, connected to your senses. And when you heard that ding, that was the trigger.
That's a trigger.
I'm super glad you're talking about it today. That's great. We need to talk about that. There are lots of things that are triggering.
Yeah, there are. Excited.
Me too. Thanks for joining us on This Might Be Triggering, a mental health podcast, because avoiding your problems is so last season.
Join us for honest talk, relatable stories, and real tools for emotional wellness and relationships. It's not therapy, but it is therapeutic, with insight, humor, and something useful in every episode. So I've got my notes here today because I don't want to miss anything, because we're talking about trauma and triggers.
Yep.
And it's just so important. And it's something I talk about in almost every single counseling session, because I am a trauma-focused therapist. So I advertise myself. And, you know, we have a history of EMDR training.
We do.
That's where we really bonded and got close, doing some EMDR training. So I know you're doing trauma work too. And I think quickly when you start doing counseling, you realize how much trauma affects people. They come in with anxiety and depression. And once you do the history fact-finding portion of the sessions, you're like, there's some traumatic events there most of the time. Actually, I would even say all the time.
Absolutely. We don't get through life without having traumatic experiences. Yeah. I know you're going to talk about the definition of T1, T2, and all of that. When I see couples or when I see families, there's always an element of a traumatic event that has happened, and then it keeps coming up. So it's a really important topic. I'm glad we're talking about it today.
Yeah, me too. So trauma, let's talk about why it's important and then what we can do about it.
That sounds great.
So trauma, what is it? Trauma is definitely, like you said, something that we all experience. A traumatic event doesn't always equate trauma.
Right.
So trauma isn't just an event. It's the body and brain's response to it. We have what I call big trauma, little trauma. I think we're pulling away from those terms, and it's more like, I think you said
from the T1 and
T2. Yeah.
I'm glad we're pulling away from those terms, because a traumatic event for someone is a traumatic event for them, and everyone experiences things differently. So.
Yeah. Yes,
glad to hear.
I think an analogy that has helped me in my counseling room and just understanding traumas is at night when you're sleeping, the brain doesn't pop out and go hang out with other brains and they compare what they've experienced, right?
Right.
The brain, you know, it's singular to you and your experiences. And so two people can experience the same thing, and one can walk away and it can be trauma that the body is holding on to. And the other one, it's more of it was a traumatic event, but it just created boundaries at which they live by at that point on. Mm-hmm. So there's not a comparison, because I can't tell you how often people will tell me about a trauma they experienced, and they'll say, oh, but it's not that big of a deal. People have been through worse things. Well, your brain doesn't know that people have been through worse things, right? Your brain's not going to go, oh, let's get over it. It's going to hold on to it.
I love that. I think that's so funny. When you go to sleep at night, your brain does not jump out and go hang out with other brains and talk about the trauma. Well, what's the trauma you've been through?
I think that's a coping mechanism a lot of people have. It's not that big of a deal. I'm just going to stuff it, because who am I to complain about my traumatic event?
Yeah, absolutely. And trauma impacts each one of us differently. One of the things I share with clients is that when we go through a traumatic event, or actually behind us is the window of tolerance. I love using that in counseling. So if you're listening to us, a window of tolerance represents what you can handle and what you can't handle. Yeah. And when you're outside of your window of tolerance, you're having a nervous system response. You're not able to cope. And when you go above that window of tolerance and you're yelling or screaming, you're hyperarousal. Mm-hmm. And when you go below that window of tolerance, maybe you're shutting down or being quiet. People don't realize that that's a response to trauma. Mm-hmm. You're hypoaroused. But when we experience a lot of trauma, it pushes us outside our window of tolerance.
Right.
And one thing I explain to clients is those traumatic experiences. I told you about my friend who was on an elevator, got stuck on the elevator. She's claustrophobic. It was very scary. She pushed the button on the elevator. The guy responded from the building, said they were coming. 30 minutes later, no one's there. And he was trying to get in touch with some supervisor. Then she finally learned, just call 911. And the fire department got there, and they were able to get her out.
Okay.
It was very traumatic for her because then the doors opened and she could see a little bit. She was afraid the elevator was going to fall.
Oh.
She heard all the noises. And I shared with her, when we go through traumatic events, it gets lodged in our amygdala portion of our brain, which is in the back. It's also known as the lizard brain. And it's very connected to our senses, our sight, our sound, our touch, our feel, our smell even. And so the brain's taking in all of that information. And when it's a traumatic event, it sends it to the amygdala. And so it gets connected to everything you heard, everything you saw, everything you smelled, everything you felt. So when she hears that ding, that's the trigger, and her amygdala goes, oh my gosh, because the amygdala comes online, you're not going to say or do anything in that moment to make it better.
Right.
You have to bilaterally process and all of these other things. So she is just triggered by that sound.
Yeah.
And it really takes processing that and understanding that and working through it with someone who's trained in trauma work.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, there's always kind of this joke whenever people talk about going to see a therapist, like, oh, tell me about your childhood, right? Like, oh, what you know, how did my parents screw me up when I was a child? But there's some honesty there. There's some truth there, right? Because when we're born into this world, we have this fresh little baby brain that's just ready. The world is a big, confusing place. It's ready to take it all in and learn right from wrong, up, down, left, right. What is this world? And that little baby can experience and will experience, as it grows, traumatic events. And it can be big traumas, like we talked about, the different tiers of traumas, and it can be little traumas. And I love that you mentioned the sights, the smells, all those different senses are coming into play when they're little, especially before they can talk.
Right.
And so we have these traumatic events that the body kind of holds on to, and then that takes us into triggers, right?
Yes.
So what is a trigger? A trigger is the body's response to holding on to these traumatic events.
That's beautiful.
One example that I have of like a smaller trauma is imagine a little girl named Susie that loves wearing her hair in pigtails. She's worn her hair in pigtails since she was little, and she continues to wear her hair in pigtails up till second grade, for example. A peer comes to her and walks up to her and looks at her pigtails and says, your pigtails are stupid and you look stupid, and walks away. And little Susie's like, what the heck? That was really mean.
Yeah.
And although that wasn't this big, obvious traumatic event where maybe the teacher, it's not like a blow to her head or anything like that, it still was a moment where she was like,
it was traumatic in that moment.
It was traumatic. And the thing is, the brain wants us to be safe always. The brain is always seeking for safety, because safety means you get to thrive socially, emotionally, relational. And also, if you're safe, then you're going to survive. And the brain wants us to stay alive.
Right.
In that moment, little Susie, she didn't feel safe to thrive socially. Her peer came to her and embarrassed her. And then the next day, her mom wakes up with Susie and says, let's do your hair in pigtails like we've always done. And little Susie says, no, I don't want pigtails anymore.
Done with pigtails. Susie's done with pigtails.
And again, that would be considered maybe a little bit more of the little traumas. And then we have the big traumas, a little bit more obvious traumas, sexual assault, rape, molestation, things like that can happen that really rewire the brain. Held at gunpoint. Kidnapped. Yeah. And I would even categorize being stuck in the elevator as a kind of a big obvious trauma, because what's the brain thinking at that time? The brain is not feeling safe.
No, not at all.
Yeah. And so keeping that in mind helps understand what is a trauma and what is a trigger. A trigger is the body's response to the trauma that it has experienced, right? It's the body responding. It's the amygdala coming online. It's the prefrontal cortex, your logical part of your brain, completely shutting down. And your threat detection system is lit up. You're in fight or flight mode, fight, flight, freeze. And so whenever you're in this fight, flight, or freeze mode, that's when you're triggered. And I think that trigger is a buzzword that's kind of misused sometimes.
I think you're right.
When people are just kind of bothered by something, they say, that triggered me.
Right.
Or they're slightly offended or very offended. That triggered me. It very well could trigger in some instances, but I think sometimes that line is a little blurred between like an actual trigger where, hey, this is lighting up my amygdala. This is a trauma response that I'm having versus that bothers me.
I love that. I love the distinction of that. And just going off on what you just said, like little Susie, think about that and other events that over time really impact your ability to be in a relationship.
Yeah.
Whether it's a friendship, whether it's a romantic relationship and parenting, and not realizing how they connect to each other.
Yeah.
So that's great. I do a mom's class, and we just talked about that the other day because a lot of the children are in elementary school, and we were talking about events just like that and why kids say what they say and how we're impacted by that. And then also our mother response to things like that. What? She said what? And then what we want to do, well, that's also can be triggering to your own experiences. So seeing how all of this connects and understanding the neurobiological response, I think is very important. Very important. And I like what you said about counseling. People said, are you going to talk about my childhood and all of this? I don't know that people actually know there are therapeutic techniques designed to address trauma, EMDR, brain spotting, and it gets to the heart of what's going on with the amygdala so that you can process that trauma. And I think that's important, and I don't think people realize that. Not everybody, maybe.
Yeah, I know. I think that a lot of people don't know. What I was saying earlier, people will come in with anxiety, depression, and they're like, just help me not feel so anxious.
Right.
And yeah, of course, there's some grounding techniques, there's some breathing techniques. We can calm the central nervous system. We can just figure out some different coping skills, circle of control, things like that. But the root of all of these responses, I mean, when you're anxious, what's lit up?
Right.
The threat detection system.
Absolutely.
What lights up the threat detection system?
Absolutely.
Trauma and triggers. So it's like, what happened? And then sure enough, there's usually big life events that have happened that has led to this anxiety. So the beauty of EMDR and brain spotting, it's like, yeah, let's figure out these coping skills and these different techniques we can use. But with EMDR and brain spotting, we can offer a space of healing, which is really, really nice.
Absolutely.
And something I tell people too is a lot of the traumas and things happen when we're young, because again, we're growing and developing, and sometimes a traumatic event doesn't result in trauma. Sometimes it just creates boundaries. Sometimes it just sets parameters for us. It doesn't always turn into a big thing. But whenever it does turn into a trauma, then we can do the work to process it, and you can be the adult in that kid's life. Because if the adult in your life created the trauma, they themselves may have trauma. That's generational trauma. They themselves may have grown up in a home and they just kind of follow suit to what they know. And because of that, they're not going to have the emotional capacity or the emotional space to say, hey, I'm sorry for what I did. Hey, let's try to make that better. Hey, let's do things different. They're just going to keep doing what they're doing and hold on to what they're holding on to. So sometimes being the adult in that little kid's life that was injured or hurt or traumatized, that alone can be really, really healing.
Absolutely.
That's parts work and EMDR. That's a whole nother way of helping too. Internal family systems.
It's great stuff.
Yeah.
And so if you are listening, I just thought of this and want to throw it out. If you are listening and you have experienced traumatic events, find a counselor who has training in trauma. So that can be EMDR, which it stands for eye movement desensitization reprocessing. Yep. Fabulous work. And brain spotting. Yes. Also great work. So when you are looking for your counselor, make sure they have training in that if you are working on trauma.
Yeah.
And I want to say one thing about anxiety that you just spoke about. And how there's trauma and sometimes that's connected to anxiety.
Sometimes, yeah.
Just like you're saying, triggers has gotten to be a word that might be overused. I think a lot of people are also overusing anxiety.
Yes.
And
depression. Being anxious is a normal feeling, right?
Absolutely.
Sometimes we have moments of anxious feelings. Sometimes we have moments of sadness or maybe depressed feelings. But clinical depression and clinical anxiety, those are, or generalized anxiety disorder, major depressive disorder. Those are two, that's a very different thing. And I think you're right. It is overused, saying that they're anxious or they have anxiety.
Yeah. And what I tell clients is, or people, Olivia, you might be interested in this. I say, not all anxiety is bad. I think right now people are like, oh, anxiety's all bad. And I'm like, well, if you're outside and you came out of the movie theater and the lights aren't working in the parking lot, you're going to feel anxious about that.
And you need to be.
And that's a good thing.
You need to be hypervigilant. You need to be on the lookout. That is a time where anxiety is enough. Yeah, I love using that line in sessions. I'll say, anxiety is good. And they look at me and I say, when you're in a dark alley and you're unsure of where you are, you need to be anxious. And they're like, okay. And also there's a difference between I have anxiety and I am feeling anxious.
That's right. That's right. Olivia, is that a common discussion in people you know?
In your age group?
No. I think my generation definitely, we kind of use those terms a lot, maybe in a way that they're not actually supposed to be used, but like we're kind of really desensitized to that kind of stuff. So everyone's just like, oh, I'm depressed, have anxiety, stuff like that. Which I do think my generation does have a lot of that. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. It's kind of blurred lines between what is like actually clinically anxiety and depression and all those things, and people just kind of like exaggerating a lot, or not exaggerating, but like kind of like shock factor humor and stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Like I'm just kind of used to hearing people talk like that.
Okay.
Yeah. Has anybody ever said not all anxiety is bad?
I've heard you say it. Yeah. But
You've heard me.
I think I've seen stuff like that online too.
Yeah. Good.
But yeah.
Good. It's important. It's very important to realize how it stops this.
I wonder too, Olivia, if your generation is kind of hung up on diagnosis, like having a diagnosis of sorts. Like I have autism spectrum disorder because I do. Well, I'll let you answer. Do you feel like people like are really hold on to these labels and diagnosis, or maybe diagnose themselves?
We've got generations. We've got the 20s.
Yeah. 40s
and 50s.
We're
missing the 30s.
We don't need it. I'm just kidding. No, 30s are great.
I think my generation probably has taken more of initiative to get mental health.
Okay.
I think you're right.
So therefore, like, there are more people in my generation who have those clinical diagnoses. So it might seem like, oh, Gen Z has all these issues, but it's like, I feel like people in older generations just don't really like go seek help as much. I don't know. Maybe that's a generalization, but
no, I think it's accurate. I think
post-COVID, for sure, we are much more open to counseling, and even before that. So I think you're right. I think we know more now too. With functional MRIs, we know more about the brain.
We do.
We understand all of this more because we know more about what the brain is doing. It used to be you went and just did a lot of talking, and that's what you did, psychoanalysis. We've got a lot more happening in the counseling room that's easier to understand.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
I also think like our understanding of these kind of, I don't know if disorders is the right word, but like conditions has expanded, which means like for ADHD, we understand it more now. So we have more diagnoses for it, or autism too. Like, we have a better understanding for it, so we can diagnose it more. So it's like not necessarily, I don't know, we just like can diagnose more of it now.
Yeah,
I think you're right. There's more people talking about it. We know more about it. There's more access. That's one thing that's been available. There's more access to mental health counseling. And yeah, that's good. Thank you, Olivia.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. I think a trend that I see across all age spans, like the entire, every one of my people, I guess, is this need to have a diagnosis. And I always try to explain the diagnosis is really just a list of challenges. That's all it truly is. And figuring out ways to manage that. So let's not hold on so much to the label of the diagnosis. Like, I have adult ADHD. You are who you are, but you just have these particular challenges.
Yeah.
And that's like, let's view it as that. And they're like, oh, because there almost is this like badge of honor of, I have trauma. I suffer from triggers.
Well, and I think, labels, we use them so that we can advocate for things and not limit ourselves.
Yeah.
It's not about limiting ourselves. It's really to be able to advocate for yourself and be able to share, I have ADHD, or I have Asperger's or autism spectrum disorder, or I am experiencing depression right now. I'm working through it with my counselor, and you don't need to tell everybody that. You don't tell everybody everything you know. That's something that's private, can be private.
Yeah.
So I think for me, when we use labels to advocate for ourselves, I think that's fantastic. I don't want anyone to use a label to limit themselves or to think that
And
they
it's a
can't
big
do
difference.
something. There's a
big difference there.
Very big difference.
It's not a crutch, but it is, okay, what do I need to do?
Absolutely.
What things do I need to change?
We want to advocate for ourselves and what we're going through and what we need.
Yes.
We're not limited by any label or diagnoses.
Yeah.
Love it.
I want to talk a little bit about the book, The Body Keeps the Score. If anyone listening is curious to know more about traumas and how the body manages the traumas and deals with them, there's a book called The Body Keeps the Score by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. And it's a great book.
It's a great book.
It's so informational. And he talks about how trauma quite literally reshapes both the brain and the body, and how it impacts how we think, feel, react, and even breathe. Kind of talking about your 5 senses that your friend is experiencing.
You got to say that again because it is so important. Will you please say that again?
Trauma quite literally reshapes both the brain and the body.
Yes.
And it impacts how we think, feel, react, and even breathe.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we've talked about I think it's the ADHD episode, we talked about the neuroplasticity of the brain. So I don't want people to hear this and think there's nothing you can do, that, oh my gosh, I've been through trauma, my brain has changed. Yes, you have. It's important to know that happens.
Yes.
And we are going to talk about what you can do about that.
Yes. We'll talk about what you can do, because the trauma isn't just a memory, it's a full body experience. So we can definitely work with the brain because of the neuroplasticity. We can heal from trauma.
Yes,
it is absolutely possible.
Absolutely possible.
But I think recognizing and knowing that it is a full body experience, and that is why whenever something triggers a traumatic event, sometimes it can cause sweating. Sometimes it can cause accelerated breathing. Sometimes it can cause rapid eye movement, looking around kind of nervously. It can create these very anxious-like symptoms, and sometimes even depressed-like symptoms. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Because that amygdala is coming online.
Yeah.
And that's connected to our 5 senses. What we see, what we hear, what we taste even.
Yeah.
What we feel. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And understanding trauma is so important.
It is. One thing that that is brought up a lot in my room too, and with like friends and family that I talk to about trauma, is how important for the brain to feel safe, how important that really is.
Yes.
And how that really guides our reactions and what we do. And there's a quote that I heard not too long ago, and I need to make sure to give credit where credit is due. And so in the notes and things, maybe we can give credit, because I don't remember off the top of my head
no problem.
who said it. But
whoever said this, forgive us.
Yeah, right. We'll make sure to give credit. But it says, so the brain always wants to be safe, and with safety is familiarity, right? So you're in something familiar, you feel safe.
Yes.
So because of that, the brain will choose a familiar hell over an unfamiliar heaven.
Oh, say that again.
The brain will choose a familiar hell over an unfamiliar heaven. So for example, people who maybe are they grew up in an abusive home, and then they're later in an abusive relationship. People will look at that and go, what are you doing?
Right.
There's familiarity in that abusive relationship, right? And so that's why it's so important to do the trauma work, so that we can say, you know what? We don't want that familiar hell to be familiar anymore.
Right.
Let's process it from the trauma part of the brain, the hippocampus, which holds on to memories and holds on to the trauma. Let's put that in long-term memory. We don't need to hold on to that anymore, so that we can be open to trying these new, better ways of living.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
That's really brilliant. Yes, please.
Yes, I'd love another book
Y'all-
recommendation.
Have y'all heard The Courage to Be Disliked?
Yes.
Love it.
I have it at home, but I have not read it. It's in my pile to be read.
I'm only like 50 pages in because I can only read a little bit at a time because it's pretty dense, but I looked up a summary for it.
Okay.
Go, girl.
So, it's a book based on Alderian psychology that argues true happiness and freedom come from accepting responsibility for your life, letting go of the need for external validation, and shifting your focus from past trauma to present action and contribution to others.
We love Adler.
I love it.
We love Adler.
Yeah.
Love Adlerian work. That's great.
Yeah.
I'm only 50 pages in, so I can't attest for the full book, but the first 50 pages are really good.
I've heard of the book, and I've heard it's great.
Yes, and Adler work is excellent. And using that as we're struggling with things like self-esteem and working through some of these other issues, that is phenomenal. And with trauma, having someone who's trauma trained, that's a really important element to help work through these issues.
Yeah.
Is big.
Yeah. So what I would like some takeaways to be today is one, whenever we notice a trigger, because now we kind of know what it is. Okay. Something kind of lit me up. Something definitely brought up my threat detection system, made me feel very anxious, maybe when I shouldn't be anxious, right? One of the great things you can do is name it. This feels familiar and unsafe. Let's honor the trigger, right? This feels familiar and it feels unsafe. Pause and ground yourself. Orient to present safety. You know what? I'm safe now. One great example in this is, say you grew up in a home where, I don't know, maybe you couldn't make a mess, or if you did make a mess, you were scolded because your parents would, if you spilt milk, your parents would, what are you doing? Oh my gosh, you're making such a mess. Get out of the way. Oh, you can't. Why did you do that? A whole gallon of milk wasted.
Right.
And they may be upset maybe because for financial reasons, that gallon of milk being wasted is a big deal. Or maybe they grew up in a house where a mess was a big deal for them and turned into them getting, scolded.
Yeah.
So they're reacting big to you spilling a drink, right? So then what happens whenever you're a parent, or actually, let's rewind. When you're a kid and you spill a drink again, you're going to go, oh my gosh, and frantically clean it, right?
Absolutely.
Because that was traumatic for that little kid. Oh my gosh, the people who keep me alive and safe yelled at me. I didn't feel safe at that moment. And my ability to thrive as a human was, as far as that kid is concerned, my ability to just thrive in general is at risk. My safety is at risk, and my maybe life is at risk because they're bigger than me and it's scary, right?
Absolutely.
And depending on the household they're growing up in too. So then fast forward to when they're a parent, and they may grow up thinking, I'm never going to be anything like my parents. I hated how they were. But the body keeps the score, right? And then you're a mom and your kiddo is pouring milk and it goes everywhere. And what is the initial response?
That amygdala jumps right on.
The amygdala jumps on because the brain is like, oh, when that happened to us, we needed to be scared. So now I'm the scared adult, but screaming at you because you did it. It's your fault that you did it, right? So I think reminding the brain, I'm not a little kid spilling a drink anymore. I'm not in trouble. This really is okay. We are safe. They are safe. I am safe. So grounding yourself in that moment can really help. We've talked about neural pathways before.
Yes.
Kind of like merging on a freeway.
Right.
You can reroute that because of the neuroplasticity. So training yourself to say, okay, I am safe right now. Everything's okay. It's not that big of a deal. I'm going to breathe. I'm going to focus on my 5 senses and tell the little kiddo, because we don't want to continue to do that, right? I mean, it's a small example, but it's a very real life example. Absolutely. That's a huge response to just spilling a drink.
It is. And this, for our listeners, these are examples that can grow very, very big. There's also other examples that we said: traumatic experiences, natural disasters, traumatic events, being kidnapped, witnessing someone else be kidnapped or murdered or robbed, there are all of these things. And the body does keep score. And so if you've had those things and you notice them popping up, or you may not even realize it connects to that, but if you notice that you've got this fast trigger, you are worth talking to somebody about that.
You are.
A trauma trained therapist. One thing I want to throw in here is just a quick reminder. We talked about the amygdala and our 5 senses: sight, sound, smell, taste, touch. That's a grounding technique, and it's very helpful, especially when we are triggered, because our amygdala is online. That's in a big circle, and if you can say, okay, 5 things I can see.
Yes, in this
5
room.
things I can see. I can see Olivia's brown pants. I can see the green on that plant. I can see the pink on this. And then you do touch, and you actually touch it.
Yes.
It interrupts that anxiety cycle that's going up. So definitely something you can do before you yell at kids or anybody else for that matter.
Yeah.
A lot of relationship work. We don't realize how horrible it is to yell at the person you're in a relationship with.
Yeah.
That doesn't work. That creates more trauma. And you're not even present doing the talking. Your amygdala is. So it's really important work. I'm so glad we talked about it today.
I'm glad we did too.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for joining us on This Might Be Triggering. We hope today's episode helped you feel seen and reminded you that you're not alone. If something resonated, share it with a friend, leave a review, or reach out. We'd love to hear from you.
Stay connected with us at mentalhealthcounselinggroup.com or on Instagram at This Might Be Triggering.
And don't forget to follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode.
Keep empowering your wellness one self at a time.
And together we can change the world one relationship at a time.
This podcast is for educational purposes only. It is not therapy, does not create a therapeutic relationship, and should not replace professional mental health care. By listening, you agree not to use this podcast as medical or mental health advice or as a replacement for therapy. If you need support, please reach out to a licensed provider in your area. If you're in crisis, call or text 988 in the U.S. or contact local emergency services.